I think each of us has had some sort of incredible experience with Yogacharya. And I had read the autobiography in 1967, but it doesn't really tell you how to meditate. Well, I started hearing murmurings about, oh, there's this Mr. Black person out there. And so finally I was invited to a meditation, and I figured it was going to be about an hour long. Well, it was a Christmas meditation. I was tricked, but I had read Autobiography of a Yogi, and I decided, well, I'm going to pay attention, follow directions, and do this. And so the first hour, I was kind of fidgety. It seemed like it was going on forever. But then the second hour, I started getting locked in, and things were starting to become really still. And then it went faster. And then finally, the last hour went really fast. And they were turbulent times. I'm glad to see many of you who were there at precisely the same time I was. There was the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement with Martin Luther King, the flower power, drugs, and rock and roll. Just tons of things. The country was divided, very similar to what today is, especially about the war. And I was saying, if this is all there is, I don't want to be here, you know. So I just kept going. And at the very end, this huge wave of unconditional love swept through me. And that was my answer. I knew I was in the right place. So then I stumbled up the little hallway, or the little aisle where Yogacharya was shaking hands. And he shook my hand and said, "What are you doing here?" Those were the first words Yogacharya said to me. I've been asking myself that ever since. So ultimately, my sister, my mother, my brother, my other sister were all touched by Yogacharya. It just spread through the family. And my father, who was very orthodox in his religion, you know, we were hiding this from him. I mean, he was not going to go along with it, but somehow at a wedding, he ended up meeting Mr. Black. I don't know what Yogacharya did, but my father was saying he's a great guy, you know, which is phenomenal, you know, just really amazing. We were raised Jewish, and when he found the picture of Jesus under the bed, it was not a happy moment. So we had been sort of hiding this for some years, actually, and we were very afraid to tell him the whole truth. But eventually he did get to meet Yogacharya, and he had a very positive reaction despite all his orthodoxy. And let's see, so I would be at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and every time I was around him, after the service, he would shake everybody's hand. And at one point he said, well, when I'm shaking people's hands, I just go up or down to their vibration, and then I know them. So then after that, we would all go into the Art Institute, where there was a lovely cafeteria, and we all sat in a little nook at a long table. And I sat on the window shelf. The table was full up. I never sat at the main table, but I could still hear, and he would tell his stories. You know, many of you have heard them, but he told his stories in a way that you would laugh, and you would understand it at a very deep level, and you knew that he was speaking from his own experience, and that he had experienced very divine communion with God and with the Master. And hearing stories about Master was wonderful. Here was a living representative of the guru-disciple relationship. He was a perfect example. Perfect. He was always very neat and orderly, meticulous. He said, consider wiping the sink out after you use it for the next person. You know, he sort of had a little discussion with one of the staff members about putting the stamp on straight up. And he said, well, what do you think it'll do to the other person when they receive it? You know, that's how meticulous he was. And so once I became a staff member, there are plenty of stories, but I'll skip over to my becoming a staff member. I became a staff member in 1975. I asked him if I could be on staff, and he said, okay. So I got to come up. And Yogacharya at that time had a little ritual where the first day the staff person came up, he would have them over for breakfast with Irmgard. And so I was a little nervous, but I got to go and sit with Yogacharya and have rice pancakes and yogurt. Anyway, very delightful, and Irmgard was sitting there. And so he said, what are you going to do here? I was not expecting that question. And I sat there for a minute and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I hope I have good stories to tell afterwards. And he said, that's very significant. That's very significant. And the breakfast was over. And that was it, you know. And so I started to be on staff, and my first task was being in the kitchen. And I didn't know how to cook. I mean, maybe a little bit, but cooking for 20 or 40 people, I hadn't a clue. So one day, my very first thing that I made was cream of broccoli soup. And I was standing there with a wooden spoon, stirring, and the cookbook in my other hand. And Yogacharya walked by, and he laughed so hard because he said, you learn through your fingertips. And that's exactly what was going on. And that was what my experience was like at the ranch for 3 years. He would throw me into things that I had never done, which is just amazing. I became the garden manager. You know, I had never planted a gigantic garden before, but he let me do it. And I was ordering fertilizer, trucks of manure. I was doing soil testing, you know, in order to get ready for this. And then planting, having the boys dig with a tractor, dig the soil and fertilizer in, and then drawing out a map of what I'd be planting. I had no idea what I was doing. But ultimately, we did produce the largest corn crop ever, which I felt very proud of. So, let's see. So then we also, when we were on staff, we had to lead meditations, and that was also very scary. You would need to memorize a whisper from eternity or an opening prayer. And he said for the opening invocation, it's like water dropping on a rock. It will break through eventually, like the salute to the Guru. So using the same invocation over and over again would break through in our meditations. And so I was very nervous, but I got up there and I started to almost become comfortable when I was leading meditations. So once I was leading the meditation and I was reading a whisper where it was, I will not ever, I will never lower my eyes from thee. And all of a sudden, I heard like this snort coming directly from the back of the room. Like, oh yeah, right. I was like, oh yeah, it really woke me up. No one else would have known, but it was, that snort was particularly for me, you know? So he made it pretty amazing to be around. Let's see, I'm gonna flip through my cards, I got lots of stories anyway. One thing he said is, no effort of yoga is ever wasted. And he also said, well, everybody makes it sometime. You know, so hopefully that will cheer you up, you know. He also said at the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Arts, there are two principles that everyone should know: the law of reincarnation and the law of karma, for their own benefit. You know? And that was what he was teaching. He was teaching yoga, and that there are consequences for all our actions. Let's see. And I think that what's really important to me is that his example of devotion and love and loyalty to Master was really significant to me, to feel his devotion for Master boosted my own. You know, the day that he accepted Yogananda as his guru, he had been meditating out in California at one of, I think at Encinitas, where Master had told him to go meditate. And he was meditating, and all of a sudden in a wind tunnel, Sri Yukteswar and Paramahansa Yogananda came in, and Sri Yukteswar said, "Accept Yogananda as your guru." And Yogacharya was kind of really blasted, and he said yes. He said, "I couldn't do that. These are great masters." And so when he came here, he said that Master had told him to create a retreat. And he said, "Master, I don't know how to do that." He said, "Don't worry, just do the best you can and we will all help you." And so here we are at Song of the Morning Ranch, and it's flourishing after 50 years and 30 years after his Mahasamadhi, because I think it's based on truth and God. I think that through the practices here and the fellowship, which is so important, it brings one closer to God. When I was on staff, I felt the presence of God 24/7, you know. Sometimes out in the world I don't, but, you know, keep it. But here it was so easy because I knew everything I did, every single ounce of effort that I put out was helping the ranch, and that it was good. And Yogacharya said good is another word for God with an extra O. So, it was really touching to me how loyal he was to Master. And I saw one young man come in and he was trying to touch his feet, thinking he was a master or whatever. And he said, "Oh, no, that's for Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda." He would not let people ever pay that type of make that gesture to him, and he would discourage it heavily. I guess I've been told he would call a person, "You look like a toad down there, get up," you know. He would not, because of his loyalty to Master and the line of gurus. And he also said the soul recognizes truth, and so every time I listened to him, he was speaking the truth, and it was being imprinted on my brain and on my soul and in my heart. I'm editing due to time. But lots of stories, and they're still coming back to me. I just remembered a story as I walked in, talking to Mary Lee and, what is your name? Ray. That I was sitting at the main table at the main house after we had served dinner, and Bob Raymer was there. And he was visiting the ranch, visiting Yogacharya. And Yogacharya said, "You're going to be here." Bob was in Hawaii. He's going, no. And he was planning on doing a retreat in Hawaii. Yogacharya said, "No, you're going to be here." "No, there's no way. I'm not going to be here. I don't like the snow. I'm staying in Hawaii." "No, you're going to be here." Well, obviously, he was right. Bob came after he left his body to take over and continue to allow the ranch to grow. So I think that's pretty amazing, because Bob said there was no way he was coming here because of the snow. this is a really strange one. Marilyn and Sue invited me to Parkside, which was his personal home in Detroit, to help stuff envelopes. They had a lot of envelopes to stuff, and we were stuffing them, just talking, and I said, oh, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a list of all the greatest musical, spiritual pieces, and if we had a list of all the greatest spiritual literature, and, you know, tons of really great vegetarian recipes. And we're all talking, yeah, that would be really great, you know. So I left, and I was driving home. And I had gotten into a car accident. I backed into a telephone pole, so the back of my car looked really kind of funny. And there was this other person that was driving like a Model A, and he looked funny too. So I was going, okay, whatever. So I kept driving, but all of a sudden it seemed like the Model A person was following me. So I went, okay, I'm going to pull over so that this Model T car goes away. But it didn't. A young man got out of the car, and he had hair like Babaji. And he said, my name is Jonathan Greenbean. I am a Chico Sand distributor. I'm going, wow, how great. And he said, here have some of these puffed rice crackers. And here's some cherries. Oh, and here's a book. And so when I got home and I looked at the book, at the back of the cookbook, which had many good recipes in it, there was a list, a recommendation of spiritual music, like spiritual literature. Yeah. It was there just by sitting in his Parkside living room stuffing envelopes. So that was very special. I was going, how could this be happening? Well, that person showed up in a Model T car. I don't know who it was. His name was Jonathan Greenbean. I don't think so. One of the first tasks, I think Yogacharya had a tendency to do this. He taught, as Janine said, in many mysterious ways. And Master had told him, you teach in a very special way, never change it. And so he, at Parkside, he asked me to dig the grass out of the cracks in the sidewalk. So I was very diligent, and I cleared all the grass, about half of the sidewalks, and very intently. I was digging like Grand Canyons there. I mean, it was just really something. Finally he said, you can stop, you know. But half of them still had, you know, grass sticking out of them. But I think he would do this to people kind of to sort of check out their attitude towards work or something, because he gave another person a project where he said, clean this big black stove, we're going to put it in the kitchen. And so the staff member cleaned the stove and said, ta-da, I'm done. And Yogacharya said, no, you're not done. It's not clean enough. And so he had to do it again. And he went, I'm done. Nope, he had to do it again. Finally, on the third try, he got it right. So Yogacharya would put these little exercises in front of you just to sort of give you an opportunity to take a look at yourself, perhaps your attitude. He was a flawless mirror. Let's see. He also, part of his healing techniques is he said he would break up the boxcars. If somebody was having a problem or was ill, he would take their thoughts that were these boxcars that were contributing to his illness or that person's illness, and he'd crack them apart somehow by through distraction or whatever he did. He said, I break up the boxcars and people get better. And also, on Sundays, we would all have guests that would sit at the main table. And he said, when people are laughing and relaxing, the teaching goes in through the back door. And so he always did discourses at the main table in the main house. It was incredible to be a staff person and be able to sit and listen to the things that he was saying. And once I brought a social worker up from Detroit who was working with like the Christian, Martin Luther King Christian, I'm forgetting the name of it, organization, while simultaneously he was having to interact with the Black Panthers. And he was, you know, having a very, very tough time. It was, you know, tough times all around. And all Yogacharya talked about was Black Panthers in the jungle. I was like, how is this possible? He's telling all these animal stories, and it's about Black Panthers. But my friend left very happy. So I don't know what message he got, but I couldn't believe Yogacharya was talking about Black Panthers all over the place. I've never, ever heard him do that again, ever. So I think that was for my friend. Let's see. It's coming back to me now. I was sitting at the main table, and everybody was having such a good time. Yogacharya had us roaring, you know. He was telling jokes. So I decided I was going to tell a joke. You know, some inane joke. I can't even remember what it was. And I told it. Well, after dinner, Yogacharya said to me privately, when I tell jokes, I'm teaching. When you tell jokes, you're not teaching. So it was like, you know, a little slap there. So I didn't tell any more jokes at the main table. So, yeah, it seems like we always have these little special moments. So, let's see. Well, he did say that yoga was the most refined culture. At other times he said yoga is the highest culture. But we had etiquette training so that when we were out in the world, he made sure that we knew how to conduct ourselves when we were sharing a meal, because he wanted us to be refined and know so that we could traverse the stratosphere of you know, social levels. And so we learned how to remove olive pits from our mouths. And do you know how? You go, you know, and you put it in your hand and then down on the table. No one would even notice. I mean, very subtle. And to do your soup, you push the big spoon away from you and then bring it to your mouth. And things like this. So he saw one staff member who was in a hurry, I guess. He was gulping. This is the same person who had to clean the black stove. And he was gulping something, drinking out of a bowl. And Yogacharya said, never let anyone see you do that again. It was just, didn't cut it. So we got really interesting feedback. Let's see. So Yogacharya would say, we got an example of an excellent work ethic because Yogacharya produced so much and was constantly thinking and planning. He created 17 patented inventions and was always coming up with new innovations. He was really incredible. And so he would say, work, work, my boy, be not afraid. Look labor boldly in the face. Take up the hammer or the spade, and blush not for your humble place. And basically, he threw me into projects, and I had the confidence because he was backing me to go forward, even though I didn't know what I was doing. So where's Jane? Jane. Oh, is she here? Okay, so Jane was leaving, and of course I had become better in the kitchen. At least one person said they would drive 100 miles to eat my scrambled eggs with chives and cream cheese. I consider that a major compliment. But my next project that I got assigned was to make draperies for the boathouse. And I had never sewn. I had never used a sewing machine. And Jane was departing. Jane had been doing a wonderful, perfect job. I was going, oh no, you know, I didn't know a thing. So Jane very patiently explained it to me. And so I did proceed to make the curtains, and they turned out okay. You know, so thank you. But you know, I also proceeded. He increased our agency that we would take on tasks, even if we didn't know what we were doing, and work through them till we got the result. So it was incredible teaching. And then there was one gentleman who was very nice, and it was like between 75 and 78, and he thought that he could maybe open a health food store in Gaylord, but it was too early. Yoga hadn't caught on yet, and so unfortunately he went out of business and was filing bankruptcy. So Yogacharya bought his entire stock at full price. And he said, never kick a man when he's down. So, yeah, it was something. Okay, this is funny. Okay. I don't know if I should say the name anyway, because these are staff people that you might know. That's okay. Yogacharya didn't like owls. They were birds of prey, and they would eat soft little fuzzy things like mice and rabbits and things like that. He did not like owls. So one day he was driving, and there was a dead owl on the road. And so he said to XYZ, please bury the owl. So after XYZ picked some feathers that he happened to really like, he was into feathers, it was so weird. Anyway, he was supposed to dispose of the owl. Well, what was interesting is we had the dam, and at the bottom of the dam, there was a squirrel. And so it appeared there was a dead owl swirling in the eddy at the base of the dam. And Yogacharya said, did you bury the owl? After he saw the owl. He didn't confront him. He had a strange way of teaching. Oh yes, I buried it. Did you bury the owl? Oh yes, I buried it. The person would be cooking on the inside with conscience. You would be on fire, burning up. I mean, and so he asked a third time. Oh yeah. Well, now go get the owl out there and bury it, So he didn't really confront people. He would have people do something wrong, and then they'd have to go to him and fess up. He would wait until they'd gotten thoroughly cooked at whatever, error they had made, and then they would come and see him, and say, oh, I did this, I did that, So, this was bad. Down at the Art Institute, there was a very intellectual young man who'd been reading a lot of books on yoga and mysticism, and he knew all these different levels of consciousness from these books. And so he went in and was listening to Yogacharya, and he said, well, Yogacharya, just how high are you? I froze. I just went, ugh. And Yogacharya thought about it for a minute, and he said, even if I could put it in words, you would never understand it. It was. This person literally shrunk in front of my eyes. It was like a pin. But Yogacharya said, having a spiritual ego is the hardest thing to get rid of. Having a self-righteous spiritual ego, very difficult to get rid of. And it can block knowledge. So, pretty amazing. I was very surprised. But that person never came back. That was that. Couldn't handle it. But, this is another one. Okay, ready? Another one of my shining moments. I was down, very rare, I didn't get to go to Parkside very often. I was down with Nancy Carroll and myself at Yogacharya's private residence. And we were supposed to wake up in the morning at a certain time. I think we might have been getting ready for a kriya initiation. And so we would have to set up tables and things like that. And I woke up late. And so I was coming down the stairs, zipping my dress. And all of a sudden, who was at the foot of the stairs? Yogacharya. I went, oops, He said, do you always walk in your sleep? And I was like, it was like, I was not awake and ready for the tasks of the day. So, when he tells the story where Master, oh, isn't it wonderful that you have all these wonderful disciples, the master made this primordial sound of I think Yogacharya had the same thing going on, because he said that he attracted all the weak, the weary, and the heavy-laden ones. Do you all remember that? And I immediately felt comfortable. I knew I was in that category. I had the right teacher, and I still wonder how I had the good karma to, so early in my life, get to be around such an advanced devotee and to learn from him. So I don't know the answer to that, but I hope I keep it up. That's what I hope. Yogacharya said in one of his next incarnations, he was going to be in India and he was going to straighten out the economy in India. So that's fine with me. I'll be there. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. We, the girls, had made lotuses out of oranges and spread them so the sections looked like oranges, and each person at the main table was served an orange as the first course of breakfast. It was very elegant. I liked it. And I happened to get to sit at the main table that day, and everyone was eating their oranges, and their orange peels all over the place. I mean, the whole table looked really messy. And then I looked at Yogacharya's. Yogacharya had reconstructed the lotus with the orange peels. I couldn't believe it. We had thrown them all over, and here he had made a perfect lotus again. I was going, wow. Let's see. Well, he seemed to let us do things. So I guess I wrote a play on Milarepa. I really liked Milarepa. And I asked Carol Armour to be in the play. She said, I'll only do it if I have no speaking lines. So I think there was a narrator telling the story of Milarepa and how he had to do things for his guru over and over again. But finally he made it, and he was a strange green creature that fly across farmers' fields and things like that. Well, when Carol came out from head to toe in green, including her face, everyone was so dumbfounded that she was a showstopper, and that's when the play was over. I mean, it was just amazing. So we did some goofy things. And I would come up with these ideas for parties. And so I said, oh, let's have a Halloween party. And Yogacharya said, okay, but I'm not going to be there. People are already wearing too many masks. And so he did not attend. And one person got thrown in the lake, and I got a whipped cream pie in my face. This was not a highly spiritual activity. And I was really glad when Yogacharya came back, you know, and restored the higher level of consciousness. We still have a little time yet. I once said, oh, let's have everybody up for the 4th of July. Okay, let's have a picnic. I didn't realize that it was such a good idea that 120 people were going to show up. And I went, oh my goodness, what activities should we have? And I hadn't thought of anything, but Marilyn Becker had come up, and she wrote an entire play about the Founding Fathers and Liberty. And various staff members were George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and it was so great. Everybody had just the best time. And I believe I was carrying a large pan of lasagna. I had never fed such a large group. And I tweaked I got a spasm in my neck. And so there was a young man there that I don't know, he was sort of a chiropractor, but not a chiropractor, he was something else. And so he said, oh, I can fix that, and he was fixing my neck. And then Yogacharya walked by. And, you know, that person really got it. It was not pretty. I think he has told that story in previous birthdays, but, you know, anyway. Okay, let's see. So I probably have many more stories, but we're coming close to the end. And we have Linda who's ready to stand up and give us an update on